Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Wellness Revolution podcast. I'm Gracie, and I am here with Melissa Sellevaag from the Wendt Center. Hello, Melissa.
Hello, good to be with you.
And I'm very excited for you all to get to know Melissa and the work that Wendt Center does. And we're going to talk today specifically about how to support ourselves and our schools through moments of uncertainty and transition and all the feelings that that can bring up. And I really want to presence that right now in Washington, D.C., with the federal takeover. At the time of this recording, we heard our mayor said that this is going to be indefinite. And I know I had a lot of feelings to work through, and I'm working through about that. So just to really ground what we're talking about today is what we all need to be talking about. And I'm just very grateful to have this opportunity to talk with you, Melissa, and dive into these issues that are just so important and affect so many of us in schools right now. So can we start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself and the work you do in schools, and then also like, why do you work in schools and what do you love about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a social worker by training. I've been a social worker in Washington, D.C. for a long time. And I've been at the Wendt Center almost 8 years, and we are a small nonprofit agency focused on grief, loss, and trauma. That's all we do. So we provide individual and group mental health care to folks navigating significant life events. And we also have a schools program where we're in DC public and public charter schools running grief and trauma groups. When I came to the Wendt Center, well, let me pause. My role here is I run our training and our crisis program, which I'll talk about crisis in a minute. But when I came to the Wendt Center, there was a sudden vacancy in our schools program. So I was kind of thrown into the schools program and was leading trauma groups in a charter high school. Um, and so that was an incredible experience to be able to kind of take over halfway through our program there and work with these kids through the end of the year, and then ended up seeing a couple of them individually at our office to continue the trauma work. Um, and schools are, I mean, they're an incredible place. And I think they offer a wealth of opportunity to meet people where they are, which is kind of this core social work value of really starting where the client is and showing up in their environment. And schools offer that both for students, administrators, and teachers. And in the work at the Wendt Center, in my role, I push into a lot of schools when hard things happen. A student dies, a teacher dies, a traumatic event happens in the community. And we offer coaching, both grief and trauma coaching for the adults on how do we navigate this? What are we thinking about? As well as some short-term stabilization sessions for the adults so that their needs can be met and they have a space to process what they're navigating so they can continue to show up for the students who are coming in and day after day. And I think in schools so often, and this is why I love the work of Empower Ed, the kids should be the focus in the center, but we can't forget the adults who are there to show up for them every single day. That when we have healthy, cared for, heard, valued, seen adults, we will have cared for, heard, valued, seen students, and that is going to help promote wellness outcomes and educational outcomes, and really help kids have a safe space to show up day in and day out. Um, so I think it's really important that people are strategically in schools supporting teachers in a way that administrators aren't set up to do. They're running a school. They're not trained therapists, they're not psychologists, they're not social workers, they're, not policy advocates. They are teachers who have gone into and been trained in leadership. And so we can't expect them to do everything. And so how can we come in and support the efforts of that leadership and of the school culture, to promote healthy environments for everybody who enters that building. That was long-winded, sorry.
No, it's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, one of the frameworks that we've been using in our schoolwork lately is the whole educator framework. It's an Aussie framework, and I think it's pretty revolutionary. Not in its content, but basically like educators need these things to feel whole. They need to feel safe. They need to feel valued. They need to feel seen. But I think what's revolutionary about it is you're like, oh, we've so accepted this whole child framework that children, they're not just like robots, that they need to be cared for, they need these safe environments. And being able to share this with educators is actually like really powerful, because people are like, yes, thank you for seeing me as whole. And I think that that is so much of the shift that we do need to see right now, is to recognize that the adults in the building, that they're working with their own trauma, they're working with really difficult life situations and trying to understand all that, and that they need to have some space to deal with that and support to deal with that. So I really appreciate the work you all do.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been using the analogy that there is no baggage check at buildings, right? Like you go to the airport and you can check your bag and it magically, hopefully, gets to its destination. You don't have to worry about it, right? Mostly. And then you just struggle with your carry-ons to fit them where they need to fit. But there's no baggage check for jobs, for schools. Kids and teachers and administrators bring all their stuff in the building. And so we need tools to manage that baggage and be able to, hold on to it and see it and witness it and figure out ways to regulate it so we can set it aside to focus and use different parts of our brain. But that kind of, I just want to travel. So that analogy is speaking to me lately. But, I think it's that understanding, like you said, that the whole person is entering the building. It's not like we just have little heads sitting on tables and little heads of teachers, like the whole person is entering. And teachers are great at compartmentalizing, and they shouldn't have to, right? They shouldn't have to compartmentalize in the way they're asked to compartmentalize. They should have the ability and supports to actually integrate what they have gone through and use it in a way that's healthy and kind of helps them feel whole and fully present for students. But they often don't have the capacity to do that.
I have literally heard admin talking to it in staff meeting, being like, check your stuff at the door, just to use that language. So I think people often get the opposite thing, that whatever's going on outside of your life, doesn't have place in the school. And it just, maybe in theory that's great, but that's just not what practice is, that we are, like
Right.
you said. And I've also heard, especially from the admin that are not with that mentality, saying like, there's just schools are different now, that like they're different post COVID, that people are having a harder time. So I'm just curious, like what kind of need is there for like grief and loss work in schools right now?
Yeah. I mean, and it entered the building and it's not leaving the building. And I will say one of the things that COVID did do was it forced people to acknowledge that grief and trauma are in the building. Whereas before we could kind of ignore it and it was just an incident or that school or those kinds of things. But grief is in every building. And we know from the CBEMS, which is the Childhood Bereavement Estimation Model, that in DC, it's like 1 out of 14 kids will experience the death of a sibling or a parent, not even just a caregiver, but a sibling and a parent by the time they're 18. And so if we extrapolate and know that families in DC aren't often just mom, dad, and like 3 siblings, right? It's they look different because we're in a city. And so families are kind of what people make of them. So we know that number is actually higher. So it's in the building. And we know trauma's in the building, from the takeover to the impact of COVID to all of the social determinants of health, housing insecurity, food insecurity, community violence. And so I think if we can understand how grief and trauma impact how an individual, either a child, a teacher, or administrator, shows up and engages with systems and other people, then we can meet those people with compassion. Like if I understand, like when I explain trauma to people, I often say, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you and how have you survived. And so if we can shift that and be like, look at things with curiosity, not a voyeuristic curiosity, but a curiosity to be like, I wonder what this behavior is telling me. I wonder why that person is so frustrated that the copier is broken again. Or I wonder, that curiosity, it informs a compassion lens. And I think what we need right now is a lot more compassion and less shame and blame and marginalization. And so when we can understand how grief and trauma come in and we can get curious about it, I think that opens up the door for collaborative spaces, creative problem solving, belonging, which we know is critical, and kind of being able to see and witness and say, Gracie, today looks like a hard day. I'm going to tap you in, or I'm going to tap you out, or I'm going to support you, or I'm going to put a random cup of coffee on your desk, or I'm just going to see that you are a human being showing up for these 26 students. And it looks like maybe there was some stuff going on before you got to school. And I don't need to know what's going on. I can't solve it. I'm not your therapist, but I'm just going to validate that you're a human being whose stuff has come into the building. And let's just see and witness that. And that creates space for being able to tend to ourselves and tend to those around us through that lens of compassion, which I think is really, really critical right now.
There's so many things in what you just did that I think are good modeling. Like being able to like say like my name and the eye contact, like those are like really humanizing things. And even though I knew it was just an example, I was like, oh, I could like feel myself physically respond to that. And then also just I think there is this issue in education that everything is a problem and everything needs to be fixed. And while there are problems and some things can and should be fixed, I think there are some things like what we're talking about, this more emotional terrain that probably can't be fixed, but you're saying to see it, to recognize it, to validate it. Like, and I think that those are really good skills for people to be able to have, because I do think people shy away from the things that they're like, I don't know how to fix that for you. So I'm going to move away from it. But just to be like, yeah, I don't know what to say right now, but I know what you're going through is hard. And I think that those are the movements that help people just kind of feel more included and able to just like be in an environment, even if they are struggling in that environment too.
Yeah. Well, and we are from a very early age, we are rewarded for solving problems, and problems have solutions. And so if you are struggling with math in first grade, you get tutoring, or you stay after school and get some homework help, or and teachers look to solve problems. And you're rewarded at your agency. You find a problem with the budget and you fix the budget, like you're rewarded for that. So we often look at things through a problem-solving lens. That's a very Western culture thing, especially in the United States, that solving problems gets rewarded. When you're talking about grief specifically, there's no fix. Like it's literally about holding that space, about stepping into the messiness. And when we realize we can't solve a problem, that makes us really uncomfortable. And for some people, it activates anxiety because they realize I actually can't solve this. And for some people, it causes them to stumble over words. And so, at its core, I think people who are navigating significant loss events and trauma events, um, traumatic responses need that validation, need to be seen, and need that sense of belonging, that even in all of your messiness, you are still wanted here, and you don't have to solve that, but I can hold your emotions. I can tolerate this. And I think that's really critical that we step out of that problem solving. When a kid shows up after mom dies or sibling dies, the teacher can't fix that. And that makes them uncomfortable. It makes a human uncomfortable. So how do we actually just be like, I'm really sad that that happened, and I've got you in here. We can tolerate your emotions. We can handle your emotions. We can hold your emotions. And let's talk about what that looks like, and coming up with that plan for that kid, and understanding that for all children, behavior is data. And so how do we look at that through a less punitive lens and more of that curiosity lens? And I think the same is true of adults. Like, how do we actually understand that I don't have to fix your problems, Gracie, because I can't, but I can just acknowledge them. And if you're seen and heard and validated, that actually can settle the nervous system and increase your capacity to show up in a school for kids.
I love that all behavior is data. Like, because it is interesting, like as an individual, like we're not trying to fix each other, but as like a population, if we look around to be like, wow, everybody is calling out right now, like what is happening? I think to be able to ask some of those bigger questions and look at things a little bit more systemically in those moments,
Yeah.
can be really powerful too, to just be able to like look at it. Because I think we do hear sometimes like, no one cares about school because they're calling out all the time. And like, we always try to be like, is that true? Like, what else is going on there? Because like, I know that the people who are in the school care about those kids, but there
Yeah.
are lots of other things that are happening right now. Uh,
Yeah.
we started to touch on this. So I want to keep going with navigating uncertainty and kind of the way we can't fix that. And
Yeah.
so talk a little bit about that. Like, how does
Mhm.
uncertainty affect people, and what can people do to help themselves when they are noticing themselves in a period of uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, we don't like it as humans. Like, we like to know what's coming, and we like to, sorry, the light just went off. We like to know what's coming. We like things to be predictable. And uncertainty really can activate our anxiety, right? Like, I talk about a lot, and this is a very simplified definition here, but when we try to control things that are uncontrollable, or when we recognize that actually things aren't in our control, that can activate our anxiety. And right now, with where things are, there's a lot of uncertainty, from funding to how things are in the district and kind of the federal interactions to job security. We probably have teachers who have spouses and, family members who are impacted by federal layoffs, and we're thinking about like educational funding. There is a lot of uncertainty for how things are going to look. And so it would make sense that for many of us, we're feeling a heightened sense of anxiety, swirling thoughts, kind of body sensations. And so, first is like naming that how I'm experiencing the world right now makes a lot of sense. And so, that validation, I think, is really important, and self validation is really important and powerful. And then I encourage people to actually and this builds on the work of Dan Siegel, who talks about name it to tame it when he talks about the whole child and working with kids. But kind of expanding on that is, if we can notice what's happening in our bodies, locate where it is in our body, acknowledge that it's there, and then tend to it, we're shifting the locus of control back to ourselves, and we're actually calming our nervous system. So it could look something like, I'm noticing it's actually, I carry it in my chest, like legitimately, like my chest gets tight. It feels weird to take a deep breath. It feels heavy. And so if I'm noticing that and actually tuning into it and acknowledging, I'm not happy it's happening, but I'm acknowledging like, okay, this is actually happening. Now I need to tend to this. I can actually then do something to regulate my central nervous system. I use the analogy with people, like if you've ever had an infant and the infant is screaming, at least my kids did, for no reason, what seems like no reason, right? You change diapers, you fed them, you've burped them, and all you can do is swaddle and rock them, right? You actually have to tune into them. So you have to kind of help them regulate. You have to accept this kid is screaming and I've got to do something to help their nervous system calm. It's the same thing with us. Like, we actually have to tune it in. And the more we deny it or be like, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I have to tend to these 26 kids in front of me, or I have to do this, or I should be doing this, that's where the struggle lies. And within the struggle is suffering. And so when we lessen that struggle and just be like, this is a hard time, like right now is a really hard time. And I'm going to notice my body and I'm going to tend to it. We shift back to that locus of control. What I actually have control over is tending to my chest in this moment. And that's going to increase my capacity to be present for these 26 kids. And educators are really good at tuning out their bodies because they don't have control over when they go to the bathroom and when they eat. They're wedded to a bell schedule that they didn't create. And so they're really good at tuning that out. And what I'm asking them to do is actually to tune it in. And that might require regulation breaks. That might require taking the first 2 minutes of class and tuning into themselves and finding ways to notice what their body's telling them and tend to it so they have capacity for the kids in front of them. And there's tricks and ways to do it in a school that work within the schedule that they don't have control over. But that tuning in, I think, is really important, to create some distance from the swirling thoughts of I have no control right now. Actually, we're tuning in and we're able to find what we do have control over.
I love all of those techniques and how they kind of, the self-validation feels so important to like just those practices to like, even if it does seem a little corny or something, just to be like, I am going through a lot and I am doing pretty well right now. And just being able to say that, I was doing that to myself this morning because I was just feeling the churn and the overwhelm and the anxiety. And then I was like, you know what? Like, actually, I'm handling this okay. Like, it's not perfect. Things are falling out. And like, even just saying that to myself, I could feel that kind of like coming back into myself and
Yep.
grounding.
And research will tell us to take it one step further, to use your third person, to refer to yourself as Gracie. Because
Oh,
when we refer to ourselves in the third person, we create some psychological distance. And we notice that I am not my thoughts. I am not my body's like reaction. Those are momentary, fleeting things. So when I say, Melissa, you are doing the best you can in this moment. Like it's that validation that we would give each other or that we would give our best friends. And it creates some distance so that we are not our thoughts. I am not an anxious person. I am experiencing anxiety more frequently now. I am not fill in the blank. I am experiencing this now. Just like we teach our kids, you are not, you are not a bad kid. You are not a mad kid. You are not an angry kid. You are a child who is experiencing the emotion of anger. And so we create some of that distance, which actually then shifts that control even more.
I love that. Can you talk about the role of trauma in this too? Like if an educator is coming in with their own trauma and also navigating some of this, like what do you recommend?
Therapy. I love
Therapy,
therapy.
therapy.
Therapy all around. But it's true. So trauma impacts our how we view and interact with the world. It impacts our sense of safety. It can feel activated and heightened, especially when the world around us feels very uncertain. And so I do think it's important that we know our own stuff and we have strategies, tools, support systems to tend to that. So when we're entering into the school with our own trauma histories, and maybe it's unresolved trauma, meaning that they haven't had therapy or corrective, kind of strategies to tend to the body activation. We need to recognize that that's going to impact how we see the world. And so I talk about it a lot with people when we're training on trauma that um, folks who have experienced a lot of trauma they often click into the safety part of their brain because our brains at its core are designed to keep us alive. These are threat detecting machines that activate when there's a threat so that cortisol and adrenaline can go and we can get to safety or keep ourselves safe. That is how we have survived over the centuries. And so as a threat detecting machine, if we've experienced pervasive or chronic trauma or are currently experiencing trauma, it would make sense that our brains are in their safety seeking mode all the time because that is going to, cancel out everything else. It's safety first. And when you're in your safety part of your brain, your executive part of your brain is not online. We know that from brain imaging. So that's where we need that regulation and those strategies to get back into the present moment and say, in this moment, here I am. I'm on a call with Gracie. I am safe in this moment. I am doing what I can to tend to myself and engage in some regulation strategies to come back in and bring that thinking brain online so that you're not reacting to students. You're not reacting to that stimuli. You're able to respond.
Mm,
And so some of that is understanding when our bodies get activated, and knowing kind of when you click into that safety seeking part of our brain. And that can come through, through therapy, through having trusted people be able to say, I'm noticing, this is what I'm noticing. And I think there's power in regulation in classrooms. So being able to take a minute, tune in, like we just talked about, and have regulation strategies that you are leading the entire class in can get everybody's nervous system back online. Because the likelihood is you're not the only one in that room who has experienced trauma and is in their safety seeking part of our brain. When we're in the protection part of our brain, we can't be in the connection part of our brain. And for teachers and human beings, but especially in teaching, connection and relationship is so critical. And so we have to come out of protection to get into connection. And that requires regulating and getting our nervous system back into the window of tolerance so that we can fully utilize our cortex and our prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, because the co-regulation is such a big part of this. And that is why, academics, we need those. Absolutely. But again, like you're saying, if like people are not regulated, they're not able to like do that work. And if an educator is not regulated, like the chances of like the class not being regulated after that are very high in that way. And that's, I think it's like the beautiful thing about the nervous system too, that when we can regulate ourselves, we bring everyone in our orbit along with us. Like it's
Yes.
very, it's just the way that we're built in our nervous systems, is that when we find that stable grounded nervous system, that we start to attune to that, and that can ground us as well.
Mhm.
And I think that's really why it's so powerful, especially for school leaders, to do this kind of work too, because the way that their nervous system is regulated is setting the tone for the educators, which is setting the tone for the students in there too. But it does take that slowing down, and we both know that that is like the hardest thing
Mhm.
for schools to do sometimes. Like the pace of it all is so much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're in some big transitions, and I think just back to school is a huge transition. And everything that happened in the spring with so many of the federal layoffs, and I think that was a lot of grief and change and hard things happening. And now, as we're starting school with this federal takeover, that's a lot for everybody. So when you think about it a little bit more like the collective, like how can we practice more wellness, and how can we do this work even when it kind of feels like the world's on fire right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think collective care is such a beautiful opportunity, and I think schools are a beautiful place to do it because you have these communities already. Like it's there, the community is there. And so, collective care, I think about it, it has to be grounded in respect and dignity. So I can only receive care from you if I know that you respect me and that, the humanness is there and is kind of the forward leading uh motivator. If I am defensive and I think you are questioning how I do my job, I am not going to be able to receive the care. So, community care and collective care is always grounded in the respect and dignity of the person. We are also human beings, we're not human doings, and that requires us to interact with each other. So, I think about, kind of how do we have compassionate accountability? How do we show up and validate that I see what's happening. I see what you're going through. I'm here for you, even though I can't fix it. This could look like finding ways to leave messages for each other. This could look like a text between classes of you're crushing this Wednesday. I can see you're crushing it. Or whoop, this place is live today. That was hard to come back after a long weekend. It could look like the beautiful work you guys are doing in the lounges, the teachers' lounges, just that they have this space where they see that actually their humanness is front and center and they're being cared for. And they can go to this space that they have collectively helped to create and engage with each other in that way. So I think this idea of being able to engage in community is really, really important. And then one of the things that I've loved, here at the Wendt Center is because the relationships are grounded in dignity and respect. When somebody says to me, Melissa, I see how hard you're working and I see how it's getting to you. I really want to encourage you slash tell you to take a day off or what are you going to do today to tend to yourself so you have capacity to show up tomorrow? When I was supervising people, and this is easier not in a school system, but I would say to them, like, I can see how hard you're working. And so let's talk about like that dental appointment that you're going to schedule next week on Wednesday, and it's going to be a doctor's appointment day. Because if they're taking a scheduled day off, it is a lot easier to plan than it is if they're calling out sick, right? So, how in this moment, what does your transition look like from school? What does your transition look like in school? How can we meet at the same time and have a walking planning meeting for our department, for our grade level? Can we go and meet in a space that feels like it'll feel safer? Maybe it's under a tree, maybe it's in the teacher's lounge, maybe it's in the door with the blind down and the door locked so nobody can come in and a meeting in progress sign goes on the door. But being able to connect and center the humanness and then actually witness and validate is important. And the final thing I'll say about this is I view our support systems as kind of falling into three buckets. So how can we identify who are the people who are our listeners? They're going to listen without problem solving. Who are the people who are doers? These are our problem solvers who are going to step in and do stuff. And then who are our distractors who can do stuff without, like, can just kind of give you that brain break. And being able to say to your person, your support system at school, I need you in my listener bucket right now. I need distraction. Let's go walk and get a cup of coffee, or let's go walk around the track, or let's go walk the stairs and talk about nail polish, or, the best new movie, or, I don't know, K-pop Demon Hunters, or whatever it is, right? That is kind of going to give you that brain break. And none of that necessarily needs capitalism and needs money. You can find ways to do that distraction in a way that embraces nature, grounds you in the moment, and doesn't require additional resources that right now feel stressful. So expand your buckets, build your.
Bend your buckets. Yeah. Yeah. I also like just kind of honoring your own style of being with people too, because there might be people out there who are like, I'm just not a space holder.
Totally.
It's very hard for me to do that, but I love being like, but I am a distractor. Like I have the gift of gab, and I will chat you up about something kind of fun. And like, we do need lots of different kinds of energy right now. So
Yeah.
just to be able to honor that. And the only thing I'll add to that amazing list is just to like figure out how to plug into activism right now. If you are feeling a lot of anxiety, I just know that that's helping me a lot about being able to help form a team at the school that our kids go to around, even if we, like, I don't feel like what we do all the time is, able to push back against the power of what's against us right now, but just to be able to like have a group of people to be like enraged with, and proactive in the small ways that we can control with. I think that's like helping a lot, and that's a big part of Empower Ed's ethos too, is just like, if it's really weighing on you, the problems, then like be part of the change. And like, you don't have to be a full-on Empower Ed fellow to do that, but if you want to meet with a council member, if you want to sign on to a letter that we're doing, just like open the emails, and there's like probably something in there that you could do that might make you just feel a little bit more control in an uncontrollable feeling moment too.
I love that. Yep.
Yeah. This has been amazing. I'm curious if there's anything else that you want to share, or that you want educators to hear right now, or you want people to be thinking about as we go into the school year.
I mean, there's so much. So much, right? But for educators and those working in the schools, the work you do is so incredible, and it's so important. And I think, 5, 6 years ago, I guess it's only 5 years ago, during COVID, where people started talking about superheroes, um, I really push back against that, because superheroes have superpowers. They can fly over buildings. They don't ever lose. They don't crash. They always, kind of have this ability to kind of win. And that sets, that puts an additional burden on it. I think teachers and school staff are incredible human beings who show up day in and day out and do messy work, in systems that are underfunded and under-resourced and often underappreciated. So in this moment, know that you have at least two people here who really appreciate everything that you do in showing up day in and day out with your whole selves. And you are valued as a human being. And so, in that valuing, center yourself and find some ways to embrace rituals, to embrace tending to yourself, to find ways to connect with other human beings, to value and center that humanness. And just know that you are appreciated and important. So it's important that you also find ways to kind of tend to yourself in these moments.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Melissa Sellevaag from the Wendt Center. Do you want to just tell people how to plug into the Wendt Center and learn a little bit more about what you're doing and ways to be involved?
Yep, you can go to our website, wendtcenter.org, W-E-N-D-T, that D is tricky, W-E-N-D-T center.org. And you can learn more about our clinical services. We have our big, it's our 50th anniversary this year. And so our 50th gala is happening in November. So that's a big deal. You'll learn more about our founder, William Wendt, who is a radical guy, just incredible and on the forefront of activism and radicalism, and was just an amazing man. And then there's ways to volunteer. Every summer, we hold our 3 grief camps for kids who are navigating death-related losses, and we rely on volunteers. We always need male volunteers because we want our male identifying campers to be able to surround themselves with people who look like them as well. So that information usually gets posted around March. So if you're interested in learning more about volunteering at camp or getting involved, you can hit up our website, and there's lots of information and people's names up there that you can email and tap into to get more info.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know someone who volunteered at the camp, and he said it was just like life-changing for him to be a volunteer. So just like, yeah, really want to do a shout out to all the work you do. Thank you for everything. And thank you for listening. We invite you just to like think about what really resonated with you from this episode, and just, is it just kind of that moment to slow down? Is it just finding that person who's going to distract you, and you know that that works for you, and to really just build upon that? And please reach out if there's anything that Melissa and I can support you with. And thank you so much for listening.